graduated from Emerson College in Boston with a Bachelor of Science in Broadcast Journalism. ሄርሜላ was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and has also lived in Oxford, MS, and Memphis, Tennessee. She came to the US at the age of 7 and almost immediately got hooked on talk shows, namely the Oprah Winfrey Show and the news magazine shows like 2020 with Barbara Walters. ሄርሜላ wouldn't put on her mom's heels at a young age and play host and reporter. I guess you could say it was destiny. በጣም ኢንትረስቲንግ የሆነ ጥሩ የሆነ ማራኪ ብዙዎችን ሊያነቃቃ እና ስሜታቸውን ሊቀሰቅስ የሚችል ባዮግራፊ ነው ያለሽ። you are really መልካም እድል። እስቲ እንግዲህ ለኢትዮጵያውያን በአማርኛ ቋንቋ ይሄን ፕሮግራም ለሚከታተሉ ኢትዮጵያውያን ሄርሜላ ባለፉት 4 ወር ውስጥ ይሄንን ጄኖሳይድን በሚመለከት የተደረገውን እንቅስቃሴን በኋላም የኖሞሩን እንዴት ጀመርሽ?
Well, ከዛ በፊትም አስቤ ነበረ. Like I really thought about it ለሁለት ሶስት ወር አንድ ነገር ማለት አለብኝ እያልኩ I just waited. I waited because in June when the federal government left Tigray, I said አሁን እንየው, like ጦርነቱ ከቆመ I don't have to say anything ብዬ ነበረ. ግን አልቆመም. It continued. It went into other regions. The activists were the only ones that were saying the story. The mainstream media was backing each other. They were both saying the same thing. And I knew the story had changed, right? So I wouldn't have had to step into that space if there was somebody else that was balancing out the conversation, that was saying, okay, this war should have stopped when the federal government declared a ceasefire. Why didn't TPLF declare a ceasefire? To me, that was an obvious starting point that didn't happen. So it really just started with me saying Happy Ethiopian New Year. I wasn't really ready to say anything, but when I saw the reaction to that, I thought, okay, like I should have probably said something a while ago, but it's better late than never. You know, I should correct what I have learned. I should you know, sort of show people where the holes are. And I was hoping that some of at least the young people would start to listen and say, oh yeah, you're right. Why didn't we stop the war then? Why did we keep going into other regions? But what I found was a lot of people either would block me because they were told to block me, so they didn't want them to hear other rational thinking or other ideas. And then I talked to some people, gave them my time, especially some of the younger people. And, you know, what I found was they weren't willing to take in new information. Everything was the same story they heard from the very beginning. If they heard information that went against that, they just blocked it. So I realized I was wasting my time, and I just started to just continue to do the work that I was doing in terms of asking the questions and showing people where to look for the inconsistencies in the mainstream media reporting.
ያው እንደምታውቂው እንግዲህ የህወሓት ወይም የቲፒኤልኤፍ ደጋፊዎች ብዙ ነገር ያው ከድጋፍ ውጪ በምክንያት የሚመሩት ነገር የለም። ጦርነቱ ከትግራይ ክልል ወጥቶ ወደ አማራና ወደ አፋር ክልል ከተሸጋገረን በኋላ በዛው ቶን ነበር ይሄን ነገር የሚያራግቡት። ይሄ ምናልባት እንግዲህ ባንቺና በእነሱ መካከል ያቋም ልዩነት ነው። ባንቺ እድሜና ካንቺ በታች ያሉ ወጣቶች ይሄንን ነገር ማሰብ እንዴት አቃታቸው? እንዴት ሪዝነብል መሆን ተሳናቸው ትያለሽ?
That's a really good question. I think that part of it is they exclude everybody else that thinks differently. For me, ከጓደኞቼ ጋር debate ያደርግ ነበርኩ. Like I would fight with my friends who thought differently, but we didn't stop being friends. So there was times where we're yelling and they're saying, you don't understand what has happened, etc., etc. I say, well, show me. I don't see it in the reports. Cool. Like we would go back and forth. So I didn't close everybody off the way that these young people have been told to do. They've been told, don't talk to your Amhara friends. You can't date Amhara people. Stop talking to your pro-genocide family. So if they listened, Usun Kasamu, that means they're not listening to anybody else's opinion. So they're in these, you know, chambers by themselves and they're saying the same thing to each other. So in Dezakahona for months, then when I come and say something different, then they become resistant, which is sad because so many of them are so young. They really don't have to be in this dogmatic thinking. They live in America with so many other type of people, and Kwan like Ethiopia and Bacha, like there's so many other type of people in America. So why are you going to limit yourself to your ethnicity? Especially if these friendships showed up a year ago, like Adis Guadingoch not show for a lot of people, right? So they left all of their old family and friends, and they're only with this narrow-minded Mers Yohonu Soch. At this point, I think they're so toxic for people. They're really hurting young people. They're putting them in a corner the further they go on. So I'm hoping that there's people waking up behind the scenes that can handle the harassment that's going to come when they say something, at least public, like what to Anaga Bailum, like as long as they're thinking of it for themselves, then I think that we're going to be in a better place. Otherwise, they're living in a sea of people that they think are their enemies. And Dezakona, I don't know how they're going to have a future.
ልክ ነሽ ሄርሜላ አብዛኞቹ በዳይቨርሲቲ ሎተሪ ፕሮግራም ከሄዱት የትግራይ ተወላጆች ውጪ 99% የሚሆኑት ቲፒኤልኤፍን እየከሰሱ መንግስትን ወንጅለው አሳይለም ያገኙ ሰዎች ናቸው በመጀመሪያ እነሱም እዛ ድርጅት ላይ የሚያምኑ አይደሉም በሁለተኛ ደረጃ ስትመለከቺ አሜሪካን ሀገር ሆነው እነሱ ያለ ሀገራቸው መተው በነጻነት እየኖሩ ዜጋ ሆነው እየኖሩ የቀሩትን ኢትዮጵያውያን በተለይ አሜሪካን ሀገር ለተወለዱ ልጆች ይሄ እጅግ በጣም የሚያስደነግጥ ሜንታል ስታግኔሽን ነው they are stagnated ከውይይት ይልቅ ወደ አንድ አድማ ውስጥ ነው የሚገቡትና ይሄንን ለምሳሌ እንደው ባንቺ እድሜ ላሉ ልጆች ምን ትመክሪያቸዋለሽ
You know, I would say we live in a big world, not the small, narrow-minded world that pro-TPLF people want you to believe. You know, you're going to ruin your life if you just stay on this narrow-minded space. These people, like Asabin, Syndicate, they hate you immediately. So they're not your friends. So if you want to never change your mind, if you want to think the same thing for the rest of your life, then stay next to these people. If you want the opportunity to grow, to think differently, to ask different questions, to want different things, you have to leave this group now. The more time you waste with these groups and ignore your other friends, the harder it's going to be to come back. Now is the time, I think, like, this is the time for people to start going back to their friends and saying, you know what, there's some things I didn't understand. I'm still hurt because of ABC, but I think there's a lot of things that I've heard that aren't true. So let's fix our friendship. Let's fix our family relationship because those people are going to get stuck in those worlds. And once you get stuck in those worlds, it's like you're limiting your entire life's prospect. You're putting all your eggs in this basket that is only loyal to you as long as you're loyal to the ideology. And we saw that. We saw how quickly people made me an enemy, right? First, I'm, the best thing. I'm a journalist. I'm saying what they want. As soon as I ask questions, I'm an enemy. I'm pro-genocide. And I don't think that's going to be any different for everybody else in those groups. So if you want your true freedom to actually be who you are ultimately, then this is not the group for you. This is such an old, primitive, just caveman type of mentality that says that our ethnicity is what makes us friends and what brings us together. They're very fickle. They'll turn on you very quickly. And we saw that with the way that they've acted towards myself and my mom.
እንደምታውቂው ቲፒኤልኤፍ ናዚ ሞዴልድ ኦርጋናይዜሽን ነው በጣም ለምሳሌ ሬፕን የሚቃወም ትግራይ ውስጥ ሬፕ ተደረገ ብሎ የጮኸ አክቲቪስት አማራና አፋር ክልል ላይ ሬፕ ሲደረግ መደገፍ መቻል የለበትም የኢሹ ጉዳይ ነው አሜሪካን ሀገር ተወልዶ ከአማራ ጋር ኖሮ አማራ ጨቆነኝ ይሄን አደረገኝ የማይል ጄኔሬሽን ወጥቶ ያረጋል ይሄ እንግዲህ ከቲፒኤልኤፍ ደጋፊዎች የፓረንቲንግ ፊሎሶፊ ጋር አብሮ መሄድ ነው ለምሳሌ አሁን ያንቺ እናትና አንቺ ብዙ ከፍላችኋል ሌሎች እናቶች ካንቺ እናት ሌሎች ወጣቶች ካንቺ እንዲማሩ እነዚህ ሰዎች አቁመዋል ይሄ ሜንታል ስታግኔሽን ነው ቶክሲክ አይዲያ ነው ያላቸው እነዚህ ነገሮች መቋቋም የሚቻለው በውይይት ነው በመነጋገር ነው ይሄንን ነገር አቮይድ አድርጎ ከግሩፕ በማግለል ይሄንን very animalistic የሆነ ካልቸር እንዴት ሊለውጡት ይችላሉ ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ
I think, we continue to put on the pressure in terms of pushing back against the narrative. I think one of the big problems with these people that think that they're with like pro-TPLF or whatever you want to call that side is they think the West is going to rescue them. They think Nutjoch is going to rescue them. Like that's the thing that we have to get out of our brains. The CNNs, the United States government has their own agenda. In peacetime, they talk about Africa as one country, right? Africa no milut. Like it doesn't matter where you're from. Oh yeah, you're from Africa. I went to Africa no milut. During Toranet, all of a sudden they care about your ethnicity. Down to the ethnicity. It's a lie. They don't care. This is for their own agenda. And so every time I talk to, a young Tigrayan or somebody that identifies as Tigrayan and is pro the narrative that's coming out of that camp, they keep pointing you to CNN, United Nations. Look at what this next person said. Look at what this person said. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. And I'm saying that as someone who grew up in the United States, who's gotten a lot of opportunities from the United States, who has American friends from all over the world that care about me, I care about them. But as a whole, the United States and mainstream media do not care about ethnic Tigrayans, right? So as soon as people who identify as Tigrayans get that through their head, Ethiopians likely care about you more than they care about you. And that's the part that I think is so sick. They keep looking to the West to save them or to justify things that have happened. For all they care, for all the West cares, Tigray can disappear. The West does not care if Tigray disappears. So as soon as young Tigrayans get that, then they can start working with the people closest to them. Who is that? Ethiopians. Who is that? Eritrea. You have to live with those people. They're all the way over here in the United States. It's not going to matter what kind of relationships that you have with the government here or with the mainstream media here. So I think that's what a lot of Ethiopians understand, a lot of Eritreans understand, is that the West is not your savior. And that's the part I think took a lot of Tigrayans, they don't get that yet. Right? They don't get that yet because the West has come and made them feel special. It's because you're so special. They want to make you disappear, ethnic cleansing, genocide, yaracho. They make them really think that they care about them. But we know that they don't. We know that they don't because they fueled a war and we still don't know. No one has answered me how many Tigrayans have died in this war. And again, this is how the whole conversation started about 4 months ago. If people cannot answer what the cost of the war has been for Tigray, then how can they answer if it's worth it? Is it worth it? I don't think it's worth it. So that's the biggest frustration I see, is that people leave their houses, leave their friendships, leave their family, and then they talk to you about the person over there in America that cares about them more than their own family and their own friends, which has proven to be a lie, a big lie.
Yeah, this is actually the typical crisis of the Tigrayan elites. ዛለፉት 50 ዓመታት የሰሩት ለትግራይ ህዝብ የተሳሳተ ፎልስ ኮንሽስነስ ክሬት አድርገውላቸዋል ይሄ ፎልስ ኮንሽስነስ ደግሞ የፈጠረው delusion of grandeur አለ በጣም ሁለት ኤክሰሲቭሊ ራሳቸውን ወርሺፕ እንዲያደርጉ አድርጓቸዋል በ18 ዓመታቸው በ68 ዓመታቸው the founding TPLF members እሱን ነው የሚያስቡት አሁን በጦርነት ላይ አልተሰላም ካልኩሌሽኑ the human cost human wave the most archaic የሆነ obsolete የሆነ የጦርነት መንገድ ነው ሰውን ሳክሪፋይስ ያያርሽ ፊውል የምታረጊው ሰው ነው በዚህ ተነስቶ የትግራይ ልሂቃን they have to sit down the round table discussion የራሳቸውን ከዚያ አውጥቶ መሄድ አለባቸው TPLF እንኳን ሜሳያኒክ ሮል የለውም ሁለተኛ በዶግማቲክ ሌቭል ሊታይ አይገባም። አሁን ትግራይነትን ከሃይማኖትም ከኢትዮጵያም በላይ አርጎ ማሰቡ የቀውሱ ምንጭ ይመስለኛል። ምናልባት ይሄንን ነገር አንዳንድ ሰዎች this is insanity ነው ይላሉ። Do you share this argument?
It is absolutely insanity. Let me tell you something that someone who's supposed to be the rational one from the Tigray community said. First of all, she wrote this post on my mom's page saying, you know, people have been calling me and Professor, I respect you, but you have to, you know, you're losing your legacy among Tigrayans. I responded and said, first of all, Tigrayans don't decide what my mom's legacy is. She's lived a whole life and people that know her can decide what her legacy is and her work can speak for themselves. So Su Anjno. Then this person, this woman, a mother who's here in the United States, who left Tigray, who doesn't have to worry about her kid being in war, said, at the end of the day, Tigray will prevail, Ethiopia will fail. Oh, so let you tell me, this is not a crazy person? How can you say one room in a house will prevail and the whole house will burn? I am at the point, I am not babysitting these kind of idiot people anymore. Nobody should. If you have a friend or a family member who's saying stuff like this and expects you to stay friends with them, that has to end. You need to tell them they're getting crazier. After a year, they're making less and less sense. And who's getting hurt? The poor people in Tigray will never hear their names. We may not even know their stories. And it's the people traveling the world, going to protest, comfortable here in the diaspora, who can say things like, Tigray will prevail and Ethiopia will fail. It's insanity. There's nothing short of it. There was a time where I used to debate with people. It's honestly so enraging. Why? Because we're so lucky. We're so comfortable here, right? And to be able to say something like that is privilege on steroids. It's self-destructive. And it just has to be called for what it is, which is insanity. There's no more babysitting these type of people.
Yes, Professor Haragawi አሰፋ የኢትዮጵያውያን ብቻ ሳትሆን እንደ አፍሪካም ለዓለምም ባደረገችው አስተዋጽኦ ምርምር በሰራቻቸው ተመራምራ ባገኘቻቸው መድኃኒቶች እውቅና አላት። እንደ ሰው ማለት ነው። እንደ ሰው ነች። ይሄ የፖሴሽን ጉዳይ አይደለም። ሁለተኛ የፕሮፌሰር ሀረጋዊን እውቅና ሊጠፋ የሚችለው የትግራይን ጄኖሳይድ በሚል ይሄንን እጅግ በጣም ኢቪል የሆነ ጥቂቶች ብቻ የሚያተርፉበትን ጦርነት በመደገፍ የሷን ኢንቴሌክቹዋል ኢንቴግሪቲ ቻሌንጅ ማድረግ የሚቻል ነገር አይደለም። ብዙ እናቶች ከሷ መልመድ አለባቸው ብዙ ትምህርት። እሷ አንቺ ላይ የፈጠረችው ተጽዕኖ ምንድነው ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ እናትሽ?
I think, you know, she really freed me in a true sense. Malate, like when I was growing up, I didn't hear politics. I didn't hear about ethnicity. I heard Tigrinya music, Tigrinya language, Orominya music, Orominya language. Like, and then there was Ethiopian or Amharic music. You know, we didn't grow up hearing that. Obviously, you know, there's my brother and I grew up in the same space. We think a little bit differently, but even him, he's growing, he's evolving. He sees what it's like when he says something different and how everybody attacks him. So even though we're not the same, I would say he's still much better than a lot of people, because probably that he also didn't grow up hearing that level of toxicity. So what I would say to parents is, when you feed your kids, and I see people doing it to their little kids, 2-3 years old, with the Tigray flag, like genocide, like these kids don't even need to know the word genocide. What's happening when you do that is you're putting chains on them. So later in life, when things change, when the world changes, when Ethiopia changes, they'll still have the same thought process, even though it's dangerous for them. Right? So that was the biggest thing. I remember in the beginning of this war, I was saying, I wish my mom told me more about all these divisions. Like I felt like I missed something by not knowing the divisions. But at the end of the day, I'm happy that I didn't know. I'm happy that I didn't know, because at my age, with my knowledge, with my experience, I can make a decision for myself that's not rooted in hate old, primitive, toxic politics, and I can make a decision about who's a good friend for me, who's a good partner for me, who's a good mentor for me, not based on ethnicity, but who provides value to my life and really cares about me and wants me to grow. The opposite of that is you choose people based on ethnicity. By the way, did any of us choose which ethnicity we were born into? Did any of us make ourselves, create ourselves? No, we didn't. So why do we take credit for something that we didn't choose? So the opposite of choosing based on who's good for you is choosing based on ethnicity. And that person could be your nightmare, the person that leads you down the wrong road in life. And that's essentially what parents are doing to their kids when they tell them this narrow-minded world that ethnicity determines who you should have in your life. And it will show. Their lives will show over time. Either they figure that out now and not live with the regret, or they continue that way and see what these kids become 20 years down the line. They're going to become the same insane people that we're seeing now who say Tigray will prevail and Ethiopia will fail.
አመሰግናለሁ ሄርሜላ። ይሄንን ቶክሲክ የሆነ አይዲያ ይሄን ፖይዝነስ የሆነ አይዲያ እንዴት ዲቶክሲፋይ ማድረግ ይቻላል ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ?
You know, I think that it's really a big challenge. I'm not gonna lie. It's a big challenge. There's a psychological element I don't fully understand. You know, I think that maybe just people will be isolated enough where they change their minds, or they're gonna stay isolated. I don't know. As time goes on, I'm shocked by how people put their own ego, they're wanting to be right about the past ahead of their lives now. Somebody said to me yesterday, oh, you know, it's because, you know, some of the Tigrayans, they've been suffering for the last several months. That's why they were, you know, excited about the idea of going into Addis. And I almost lost my mind, because suffering for the last 5 months, you know who's suffering? The people in Amhara and Afar region. That's who's suffering for the last 5 months. For a Tigrayan to sit in there and say, and this is, by the way, a reasonable person, to sit there and say, oh, you know, it's because they were suffering that they were excited about going to Addis. They weren't suffering. They were the killers. They were the ones that were killing. So when I hear this type of thing, I think, we might be doomed. I don't know. I'm not a politician. I'm too direct in some ways. And what I'm hearing, although I do talk to Tigrayans that are very reasonable and ask questions and have suffered because of it, a lot of the people I hear are putting their ego over their own lives and the lives of the average Tigrayan in Tigray.
Yeah. When you are looking this thing, አማራና አፋር ላይ የተደረገውን ነገር አሁን አፋር ክልል ላይ የተደረገውን የልጆችን መገደል ሆስፒታል ውስጥ አማራ የተደፈሩ ሰዎችን ከአንድ ቤት ውስጥ 2-3 ሰው የተገደለበትን ነገር ያየሽ ኤኒ ሴም ፐርሰን ሰው መሆን ይበቃል። ይሄን ለመረዳት ሰው መሆን ይበቃል። ይሄ በጣም የመጨረሻ ኦፕሬሲቭ የሆነ ፓርቲ ነው። በ21ኛው ክፍለ ዘመን ፋሺዝም ነው ይሄ ፓርቲ። ይሄንን መውቀስ ይሄንን ነገር ትራንሴንድ ማድረግ የሚችሉና አሁን አንቺ ከናትሽ ጋርና በጣም ጥቂቶች የሚጮሁበትን ኢሹ ሻምፒዮን ማድረግ ያልቻሉት የትግራይ ተወላጆች በተለይ ኤሊቱ ለምንድን ነው? ለምሳሌ በጣም ቀደም እንዳልሽው ከአማራ ጋራ ከአፋር ጋራ ተጎራብተው ነው የኖሩት፣ አብረው ነው የኖሩት፣ ኢትዮጵያውያን ናቸው። ትግራይ ትኖራለች፣ ትግራይ ትለምለም፣ ኢትዮጵያ ትውደም ምን ማለት ነው? ይሄ ሊለዩት የማይችሉት ይሄንን በዚህ ደረጃ የቀውስ ይሄ አክቹአሊ ክራይሲስ ነው። ቲፒኤልኤፍ እኮ የትግራይ ህዝብ ሊረዳው ይገባል። ፖለቲካል ሳኒቶሪየም ውስጥ መቀመጥ ያለበት ድርጅት ነው። በቃ ኢዝ ኦብሶሌት ብዙ ነገሩን የገደለ ነውና እንዴት ይሄን ሪዝነብል ሐሳብ ሰው ማሰብ አይችልም ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ?
I don't know. You know, I think the elite have been up here for so long. They've been made to feel special. All their successes because they're Tigrayan, because they're the sons of TPLF fighters or whatever the case. So there's those elite that just want to hold on to their superiority complex. Those I know, I don't know what you can do about them. God help them have their consciousness. But the rest of them, I really feel like, and I know this is very like not so journalistic of me. I think there's a spiritual warfare. That's all I can say, because this goes beyond rationality. I mean, there are people who seem decent who are completely insane. And I really think that it goes down to praying, God helping us, helping all of us figure out what to say, how to say it, and then helping all these people that have been deranged by this propaganda find their consciousness, find their actual soul away from the propaganda. I don't see any practical, scientific way of fixing this, because it feels so beyond, and it feels very spiritual. Because how do you tell a person, don't go over there, you're gonna die, and they tell you, no, I'm gonna go over there because that's where I belong? It's like you can only do so much for that person. You could just hope that you pray for them, that they have the wisdom to do the right thing. That's how it feels. It feels so big because the reason isn't there anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore for people to stay so polarized when it's actually affecting them in the worst way.
እረዳለሁ በተወሰነ ደረጃ እኔ እንዲያውም የሚመስለኝ የሱፔሪዮሪቲ ኮምፕሌክስ ምንጩ ኢንፌሪዮሪቲ ኮምፕሌክስ ነው ራሳቸውን ኢንፌሪየር አድርገው የሚያዩበት መንገድ የፈጠረው ነገር አለ ሜጋሎማኒያ ሊመጣ የሚችለው ይሄ ኤክሰሲቭሊ ራሳቸውን ወርሺፕ ማድረግ የሚፈልጉት አንሰናል የሚል ስሜት ስላላቸው ኮምፐንሴሽን ነው ይሄ አንድ ሳይኮሎጂካል ክራይሲስ ነው ዜኒድ አክቹአሊ ሳይኮአናላይዝ ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል ለዚህ ሰዎች ሳይኮቴራፒ ያስፈልጋቸዋል በሌላ በኩል አብዛኛው የህወሓት ደጋፊ ወጣቶች አሁን ባንቺ እድሜና ካንቺ በታች ያሉት የትግሪያ የቲፒኤልኤፍ ደርግን ያሸነፈበትን ነገር ፖለቲካል ባክግራውንዱን ኩሙሌቲቭ የሆነውን ነገር አያዩትም አሁን ያኔ ኤቭሪዋን ቤተር ዛን ደርግ ብሏል የደርግ ፖሊሲ ደርግን ጥሎታል ዘ ሚሊተሪ ገቨርንመንት ብዙ ነገሮች አሉ አሁን 1991 በነበረ ፖለቲካል ሪያሊቲ አሁን መጥቶ ሊመጡ የሚችሉበት ነገር የለም when we are looking the other end the last 30 years TPLF dominance 6 million people toward this other proportional ባልሆነ መንገድ ብዙ ሉት የተደረገ ነገር አለ ብዙ ተዘርፏል money laundering torture ሬፕ ብዙ ነገሮች አሉ ይሄንን መገንዘብ የማይችል ሌላ ሰው ካለ ኮንታሚኔሽን ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ ኮንታሚኔት የሚያደርጉ አይዲያዎች አሉና ይሄንን ኃይል እኔም በተወሰነ ደረጃ አምስታዩ ሜንታሊ ፖሴሽን አለ ዴቪል ፖሴሽን ነው እርኩስ ኃይል ነው ብዬ ነው ማስበው ምክንያቱም ሰው አት ኖርማል ሰርከምስታንስ በጤናማ አእምሮ እንዴት እንደዚህ ሊያስብ ይችላል የሚል ሐሳብ አለኝና ይሄንን ስታስቢው ከእምነትም በላይ ነው የተደረሰው ነገር አሁን በአማራና በአፋር ክልል የተደረገው ምናልባት አልተጻፈም ብዙ ነገሮች አልወጡም ገና በ21st century ውስጥ ትልቅ ነገር ነው የመጣው ይሄ ናሽናል ሼም አይደለም ወይ ለቲፒኤልኤፍ ሰፖርተርስ
It should be but I think a friend of mine said this a long time ago for some people denial is their oxygen so they live in denial in this world where all Tigrayans are perfect. They don't do any wrong. They're the victims, but also the warriors and the winners. And everybody else is the killer and the loser that doesn't know how to fight a war, that is the rapist, the genocidal one. And so these people live in a very black and white world. And to your point, I do think it's an inferiority complex. If you genuinely believe in your own self-worth as a human, not as an ethnicity, not as an Ethiopian, not as an African, if you genuinely say, you know what, I'm a worthwhile person, I deserve the basics of A, B, C, and D. If you believe that, you don't need to believe that everybody else is all bad and you're all good. I'm humble. I know I have flaws. I know I mess up, right? At the end of the day, I still think I have value, right? And that's how people need to start switching their mentality because otherwise they end up supporting this thing that is actually such a, like you said, it's satanic to think that everybody from a different ethnicity, by the way, some of these people, half Amhara, half Tigray, but for some reason they went on the side of the parent with the Tigray or their whatever the case, right? So what is ethnicity even if you can choose? If you're half and half, but you can decide you're Tigrayan, okay, so now it doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't really mean anything. So I'm ethnically Tigrayan. I don't really identify with that so strongly, right? I feel like I'm American, Ethiopian, just sort of more global. So if I can choose to whether to identify with it or not, is it really mean anything, right? So it's, I really just think at this point, people are showing their inferiority complex. And the other thing I've noticed is the personality matters. When you look at the people with the personality that are always the victim, they do something to you and they're the victim. They blame everybody else for why they don't have A, B, C, and D, but they never say, oh, you know what? I should have done that. I should have said that. I didn't really do what I was supposed to do there. They never say that. So this kind of ideology, black and white ideology, appeals to those people that don't want to take responsibility for their role in something. And so I think that is where I really worry about the mental health. I really do. Some of these people are not well. When you tell somebody everybody you're living around is trying to genocide you, ethnically cleanse you, if you already have some mental health struggles, that's not going to help. Right? And some of the leaders sound insane. There's this girl in Denver who is Kausnat. Like, that's it. She's Kaus. Yeah. Like, she goes, Milita Gabrameskel, I swear, this person thinks she's so important all of the sudden, when she's the one who harasses Congress people, who has literally assaulted one of the activists in Denver, who is supposed to be a mother, but preaches this deranged idea that ethnic Tigrayans are somehow persecuted and more important than everybody else. So when those are your leaders, of course, your followers are going to be just as sick. And so I think any decent Tigrayan needs to stop and say, okay, this is not the type of person that should be speaking for us. We're better than this. We're more rational than this. We've lived with other people for a very long time, and this is actually hurting our people. But even the educated ones continue to make excuses for everybody else, and that is why Tigray is still where it is today.
አንድ ነገር አለ አሁን በትግራይ ኮሚኒቲ በተለይ የቲፒኤልኤፍ ሰፖርተሮች መካከል ፐርሲኬሽን ማኒ ያለ የሚያስቡት የሚፈጥሩት እና አንዛይቲ እነዚህ ነገሮች ህመሞች ናቸው በትክክል ቀውስነት ነው ይሄ የአእምሮ አለመረጋጋት ነው ሳይኮቴራፒ ያስፈልጋል ሌላ ሀገር ሰው ይታከማል እኛ ሀገርም የትራዲሽናል ሶሳይቲ ይሄ በሃይማኖቱም ውስጥ በጠበልም በጸሎትም የሚድን ነገር አለ ምክንያቱም አሁን መተሽ አማራ ሀገር ውስጥ ያለን ገበሬ ማን በሬ በመግደል የምታተርፊው ነገር የለም የትግራይ ህዝብ ከአማራ ገበሬ በሬ ሞት የሚያተርፈው ነገር የለም ሄደው ያማራ መነኩሴን ሴት በመድፈር የሚያተርፈው ነገር የለም እነዚህ ቀውሶች ስታዩ ቬንዴታ ነው በጣም ይሄንን ቬንዴታ ትራንሴንድ ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል በምን መንገድ ይሄንን ቂምና በቀል የትግራይ ህዝብ ነፃ መውጣት መቻል አለበት አሁን እኛ ኃላፊነት አለብን we have to liberate them ከቲፒኤልኤፍ ዮክ ውስጥ ቀንበር ነፃ ማውጣት መቻል አለብን ይሄን እንዴት ማድረግ ይቻላል ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ
I do think once this war is, wrapping up or comes to a close, I hope to see healthcare professionals from all over Africa, from all over the world, try to do something to help rehabilitate some of these people. I mean, I don't know how you rehab someone who's been told that there's been a genocide against them for over a year, who hasn't been hearing what the outside world is saying. They only hear Tigray Media House, Tigray TV. They don't hear what the rest of us are saying. I think there's going to be a lot of work. I think there's going to be some people that are damaged. And I do hope there's no one that's beyond repair. But when I hear some of the stories that have happened in the Amhara and Afar region, I wonder if there's some people who have been damaged beyond repair. And I think the longer that this war lasts, the harder it's going to be to rehabilitate people. And Kwan, there, even the diaspora, people need to go talk to somebody besides their toxic activist friends. This is something that's going to affect people's relationships, their own personal lives. And so I'm hoping that there's going to come a time where we start to talk about rehabilitating. There's actually a new effort some folks, including Nebiu Asfa, are leading to bring back some medical equipment and a list of items. It'll be on my social media page. And so to start to help people again, right? We've been talking about war for so long. Let's talk about how to, I know what Ethiopia is like even in normal times. I've seen the healthcare system there. Even when you have lots of money, there's limitations, right? So let alone when you're poor, you can die from simple infections. Something that's a quick fix here is a death sentence there. So after this war, I imagine there's so many people that are needlessly dying and suffering. And the diaspora, I'm hoping, as with efforts like this, it's called the #OneBag Challenge, where we're challenging people to bring one suitcase of these list of items that they can get. So I think it's going to take a lot of us to try to help fix some of this damage, which is so annoying because we already had so many issues, right? We didn't need a year plus of war to do extra damage. There was already so much work that needed to be done before, but that's the goal of TPLF, right? If they can't win, bring it back, bring us back a year or two, set us back so the damage that has to be fixed is so much more. But I believe that God's on our side. I believe that there's so many good people that are doing the work, that are donating their money, their time, their energy. And surely, slowly but surely, I think we'll get to the point where we're talking about more economic growth and not talking about getting out of this devastating war.
Yeah, and ሌፍ የሚያደርገው ነገር እኛም ማንገዛት ኢትዮጵያ መፍረስ አለባት ነው የሚለው አሁን ጠቅላላ በትግራይ ውስጥ የተፈጠረው ነገር በአማራ ክልል በተለያየ ቦታ ላይ 20-30 ዓመት ወደ ኋላ ሄደ ነው ይሄንን ገና ሪኮንስትራክት አድርጎ ወደ ቦታው ለመመለስ ገና ትልቅ ስራ አለበት ከጦርነቱም በኋላ ፖስት ቲፒኤልኤፍ ዲፊት የሚኖረው ነገር ሁሉ ይሄ ነው በከፍተኛ ደረጃ እንግዲህ ኢትዮጵያውያን አንቺ ከዚህ በትግራይ ማህበረሰብ በተለይ በቲፒኤልኤፍ ደጋፊዎች አንቺንና እናትሽን ከፍተኛ ተቃውሞ ዛቻ ማስፈራሪያ ሲያደርሱ በሌላ በኩል ደግሞ ኢትዮጵያውያን እጅግ በጣም በዚህ ወቅት የምትወደዱ ብዙ ኢትዮጵያውያን የሚያደንቋችሁና የሚያከብሯችሁ ናችሁ አንቺና እናትሽን ከኢትዮጵያውያን ያገኛችሁት አቀባበል ፍቅር እንዴት ትገልጫለሽ?
I mean, it's beautiful. I'm so grateful. It's crazy that it's so rare. If more people that identify as Tigrayan would speak out and just be rational, we wouldn't be special. I don't want to be this special. I don't want this much attention. I don't want to be so rare that this becomes a big deal. I appreciate the support. It wouldn't be possible without some of these people's support and people that I've now become close friends with, who I care about, whose values I align with. There's so many people that I don't name on a regular basis that I work with. And so I really appreciate it. But over time, I do not want to be this special. Like I need to see, or I would like to see more reasonable, educated Tigrayans speak up and actually be leaders. Right now, there are people I know who are professors, who are, successful in their career that are Tigrayan, that are a part of the problem. They're not leaders. They're misleading their youth because of their own ego and complexes. And I think that is the part that angers me the most, not the people in Tigray. Who knows what they're going through? I have no criticism or no right to criticize that. Not even the average diasporan. It's the adults, the educated adults who are doing exactly what these toxic activists are doing. And so rather than being leaders, true leaders that are helping the youth find their way, they're a part of the problem. So I'm hoping there's a time where that's not the case, but as of now, I appreciate the people I meet. We're aligning not just because we're Ethiopian, not just because we're African, but because we see a similar vision. We see similar possibilities. We're against this tribalist, toxic political ideology. And so as long as that's what we're doing, I think that, we'll be working together for a very long time.
አሁን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እንግዲህ ለኢትዮጵያ የሚያስፈልገው ያማራም የኦሮሞም የትግሬም የማንኛውም ኤክስትሪሚስት አያስፈልገውም አሁን ባለበት ደረጃ እንደ ኢትዮጵያዊ በአንድነት በእድገት ራሳችንን እንደ አፍሪካ ማዕከል የነበርንና በዚህ ደረጃ መስራት አለብን አንቺም አሁን ይሄንን ኖ ሞር ሃሽታግ በከፍተኛ ደረጃ እየተንቀሳቀሳችሁ ነው ከአፍሪካ ደረጃ ይሄንን ነገር ለማስፋፋትና አፍሪካ የራሷ ሚዲያ ያስፈልጋታል አፍሪካ የራሷን ኢሹ ፕሮሞት የምታደርግባት ሜንስትሪም ሚዲያ ያስፈልጋታል ኒውስ ኤጀንሲ ያስፈልጋታል ይሄንን ለማድረግ እንደው ዘ ፊውቸር ምን ነገር መሆን አለበት ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ
So we're slowly, that's the idea. Eventually, that's the idea. The problem is, or I should say the challenge is there's so much work to do right now that it's hard to think that big picture, but that's ultimately the goal. They have gotten us used to outsiders telling our story. It's not normal. It's not normal for Declan Walsh of New York Times, who doesn't speak, I'm sure, a lick of Amharic or Tigrinya, to tell us what's going on in Ethiopia. It's not normal. This Kara Ana from AP is telling you about starvation in Tigray. It's not normal that CNN's Nima El-Bagir, who also doesn't speak the language, is an Ethiopian, or Eritrean herself, is telling us our story. So that's something that I think we have to undo. You know, when I Google Ethiopian documentaries or whatever, I used to do this back in the day. The first 10 movies are done by outsiders, by foreigners that come in and tell you that story. We have to change that. And you know, we talked about this in terms of not everybody has internet access and Twitter access, but everybody can still tell their story. One thing that I see that I don't love and I think we can do better is, even I see it when it comes to media in Addis, we don't ask enough questions. We don't get specific enough about what's happening. So for example, you're talking to somebody who's internally displaced. You say, why are you displaced? They say, oh, we were running away and this happened. Oh, but then it happened while we were at home. The story becomes all over the place. And the reporter is not asking the specific enough questions, because I think it's Wachin and Baharachin is very modest. You don't say what's happening. Oh, like, yeah, like they're very, since we're very modest, you need a reporter that says, okay, wait, which happened first, A, B, or C? Okay, and then Kazas. We have to be very aggressive in being specific about our stories, because that's what the West is good at. So when I see media kind of half telling stories, I get so frustrated, because I say, this is why the West can say, you're not telling your stories right, because you're not asking enough questions. And so I think people need to get into the habit of doing that. If you're going to tell a half story, just don't tell it at all. If you're going to tell a half story, just don't tell it at all. You're going to pass along some message that isn't really based and rooted in something real. And so I think that's something I would really like to do some training in Ethiopia for, is to help train young people to overcome the cultural challenges of modesty and less information, to be able to tell a full story when it comes to reporting.
ትክክል ነሽ ሄርሜላ አሁን አንደኛው ነገር ራሱ በተለይ በዲያስፖራ የሚኖረው የኢትዮጵያን ኮሚኒቲ የሜዲያ ሊትረሲ ይገባዋል ብሎ ማሰብ ያስቸግራል የሜዲያ ኢሊትረሲ ፕሮብሌም አለ because የስክሪፕቸር ትሩዝ አድርገው ነው የሚወስዱት አሁን የቢቢሲን የሲኤንኤንን የጠቅላላ የሜንስትሪም የዌስት ሚዲያ የነዚህን ሚዲያ የጀርባ ታሪካቸውን ስንመለከት ለምሳሌ ቁጭለሽ ፕሮ አፓርታይድ የነበሩ ጠቅላላ የአሜሪካን መንግስት አጀንዳ የእንግሊዝ መንግስት አጀንዳ የሚያስፈጽሙ እነ ማንዴላ መታሰር ላይ ያበረታቱ ይዘግቡ የነበሩ ሚዲያዎች እኛ እንደ እውነተኛ ያርድስቲኮቹ እነሱ ናቸው ብሎ መቀበሉ አስቸጋሪ ነገር ነው የመጀመሪያው ነገር ይሄ ነው ሁለት አሁን እናንተ እንዳደረጋችሁት የተቃውሞው ነገር ከሰልፍ ከአደባባይ ወጥቶ actively engage ማድረግ ያስፈልጋል ከነሱ ጋር ያለው አሁን 3 ሚሊዮን 1 ሚሊዮን ኢትዮጵያዊ ውጭ ቢኖር ከዛ ውስጥ 1% መጻፍና መናገር የሚችል ከሚዲያ ጋራ ብዙ ነገር ቻሌንጅ ማድረግ ይቻላል እነሱ ፓርቲዛን ናቸው በጣም ወገንተኛ ናቸው ሲሰሩ ግድ የላቸው ኦብጀክቲቭም ሊኮን አይችልም እኔ ለምሳሌ ኢትዮጵያዊ ነኝ በኢትዮጵያዊ ላይ አንቺ ኢትዮጵያዊ ነሽ ምን እንነጋገረው ነገር ኦብጀክቲቭ ልንሆን አንችልም በአገራችን ፍላጎት ላይ መንገዳችንን ግን ኦብጀክቲቭ አድርገን ቅድም እንዳልሽው ግማሽ እውነትና ግማሽ ሳናደርገው የምንሰራበት ነገር አለ ይሄ በዚህ ባህላችን ውስጥ ያለ ችግር አለ ለሰው እውነት መናገር እውነተኝነት ሚዲያው ማኒፑሌት ያደርጋል ይሄንን ህዝባችን በተለይም ዲያስፖራው ይሄንን ነገር እንዴት ማየትና መረዳት አለበት ሲኤንኤን በር ላይ ሄዶ ሰልፍ ሲደረግ አይዘግቡትም in the meantime CNN ስለ ኢትዮጵያ መንግስት ወይ ስለማናምን ተናገረ የሚለው ነገር ደግሞ ወስደን ኢንዶርስ እናደርጋለን ይሄን ችግር እንዴት አቮይድ ማድረግ ይቻላል ሄርሜላ
So, you know, there's this thing called citizen journalism, right? if you don't have a phone, you have a piece of paper and a pen. You have your neighbors who have a story. So that's how people tell their stories. They look what's going on around them. If something happened, they go to that person, they ask the questions. When did it happen? How did it happen? Did it happen before this or did it happen after this? It takes a lot of work. The reason reporting is not easy is because you're asking a million questions. You're asking them a million different ways so that you get to the closest to the truth as possible. We're in general Senefnen with the questions. Oh, okay, this happened at, this happened at this time, and I'm okay, in date, meche. Sriracha, they have no answer. Yeah. Right? That's something I see in our culture so many times. And I don't feel comfortable taking that story. If I don't feel comfortable taking that story and I'm Ethiopian, a journalist from the West is not going to feel comfortable telling that story or taking that story. The reason that the pro-TPLF activists do well in getting their stories out, one, it's because the US government has an interest in telling that story. But two, they'll make up the details. They will make up the details. They will tell you the number of kids this person had, the exact day, and all that stuff. So obviously, I don't want us to make up the details, but when there's details, we need to have the courage to ask for it. That's the only way that we're going to take part in telling our story. There's, I can only do so much. Someone else can only do so much. It's, there's amazing people on the ground. Jamal Countess, Jeff Pierce has gone out there. Métis from ISAT has gone out there and they've done the on the ground work, but there's so much opportunity that's not being tapped into. So everybody needs to do their part. Did your neighbor get detained? Why? When did they get detained? Where were they? Did they get out? Were they okay? Did they say they were treated okay? Like, these type of stories matter. And the more you can share them, if you don't have social media, share them with somebody that has social media. And then that's the only way we can counter it, because we can't say, oh, CNN, you're getting it wrong. Okay, so what is the story? Then there's no point.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing that I see within us that could be improved. It's going to be something to change the culture a little bit, but I would love to do trainings in Ethiopia and Addis with young people with interest in journalism, because that's, I think, the way that we're going to change things over time.
አንዱ ችግሩ እንግዲህ ኢትዮጵያውያን ዘመናዊነትንና ምዕራባዊነትን አልተረዳነውም። ዌስተርናይዜሽን እና ሞደርናይዜሽን በሚመለከት እነሱ ለፈለጉት አጀንዳ የሚሰሩት አለ። ላስት ታይም የቲፒኤልኤፍ ሪፕሬዘንታቲቭ አምባሳደር ብርሃነ ገብረ ክርስቶስና 9 ሰዎች ተፈራረሙ ብሎ ሮይተርስ ላይቭ ነው ያስተላለፈው ከፕሬስ ክለብ ውስጥ። በጣም እጅግ ዲስገስቲንግ የሆነ ምናልባት የአሜሪካን ካፒታሊዝም ወይም የአሜሪካን መንግስት አሳፋሪ ስራ ያንዳንዱ አሜሪካዊ በዚህ ድርጊት ሊያፍር ይገባው የነበረ ነው። ምክንያቱም ላይቭ ነው የተላለፈው። ሰዎቹ ምንም የሌላቸው ናቸው። ፕሮቲፒኤልኤፍ ሆነው ነው የመጡት። መንግስትም አሜሪካን መንግስትም ሬጂም ቼንጅ ስለሚፈልግ ይሄንን ነገር ሲያደርግ አላየሁም። ኢትዮጵያዊ ይሄንን መቃወም ያስፈልግ ነበር። ምክንያቱም አጀንዳ ነው። ስቴት ዲፓርትመንት የኦጋዴን ነፃ አውጪ ድርጅት ፋክሽን ግሩፕ ጠርተው የሚዲያ ከቨሬጅ ለሚፈልጉት ይሰጣሉ። እንዴት አርገን እኛ ኢትዮጵያውያን አሁን እንደው ለምሳሌ ስልጠና ስትይት እዚያ ላይ ነው ሲኤንኤን እና ኒውዮርክ ታይምስ የሲአይኤን ፕሬስ ሪሊዝ እንዳለ የስቴት ዲፓርትመንትን ፕሬስ ሪሊዝ እንዳለ ነው የሚያትመው እንደ ኦርጋን ማለት ነው። እነዚህ ሰዎች ኦብጀክቲቭ ልንላቸው አንችልምና እንዴት ነው ኢትዮጵያውያን ይሄንን አይነት የሚዲያ ዋር ልናሸንፍ ኢንጌጅ ልናደርግ የምንችለው ቻሌንጅ ልናደርግ የምንችለው ብለሽ ታስቢያለሽ?
Just like you said, the New York Times and all of them, they literally get their sources from the US government. So there should be, and there are media outlets in Ethiopia who amplify the voice of the government. So if there's a statement, they say, here's the statement, here's what they said, have somebody on there, a guest, to talk about what it says. That's how we produce things. We take something that's released, a press release. Okay, who can we bring to talk about this? So it's a guest segment and not just something for people to read. Like, that's how we have to think. I don't want to be a person that's like a government reporter like the New York Times and CNN, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. So whoever are the media channels in Ethiopia should do that. They should be an arm that communicates what the government is saying. Whether or not they push what the government is saying is a different thing, but they should help amplify those voices, because as you notice, a lot of the times the West does not even include a statement from the government. And if they do, they say it in some twisted way. So I think that that's something that media channels in Ethiopia can do, and they do, and I'm just saying they could do it more. And then the rest of us could just focus on the human stories. If there were more people doing what I do in English and translating and connecting these two worlds, that's what it is. That's why I think like what I'm doing is sort of a big deal. It's taking what's happening in the West, taking what's happening in Ethiopia, and then speaking the same language or connecting it in the same language. That's how we always have to think. It's not good enough to just tell each other what happened. It's not, it requires us to say it in a way that both the West can hear it, whether they accept it or not, it doesn't matter, so that they can hear it in that way. That way because it's a global world. We've got social media. So if you're not talking to everybody, then you're kind of not talking to anyone. And that's something I think the future generation will have to figure out.
አሁን ለገና በዓል ይሄ በተለይ የምዕራባውያን ዜጎቻቸውን ከኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እንዲወጡ በማድረግ በተለይ የአሜሪካን ኤምባሲ አክቲቭሊ ነው ኢንጌጅ አድርጎ የሚሰራው የአሜሪካን ሲቪል አቪዬሽን መስሪያ ቤት ራሱ ፓይለቶች እንዲጠነቀቁ ወደ ኢትዮጵያ የሚደረጉ በረራዎች አሉ ምንም ዳይሬክት የአሜሪካን አየር መንገዶች ወደ ኢትዮጵያ አይበሩም ኢትዮጵያ አየር መንገድ ነው የሚበረው የአፍሪካን ከሌላው ዓለም ኮኔክት የሚያደርገውና በዚህ ደረጃ አግሬሲቭሊ በፕሮፓጋንዳ ውስጥ ኢንጌጅ አድርገዋል የኢትዮጵያ መንግስት ደግሞ በሌላ ሳይድ በውጭ የሚኖሩ ኢትዮጵያውያን 1 ሚሊዮን የሚሆኑ ኢትዮጵያውያን የገናን በዓል ጃንዋሪ 7 ኢትዮጵያን ክሪስማስ በዛም ኤፒፋኒ ያለ ይለጥምቀት እንዲመጡ ጋብዘዋል በዚህ ፕሮግራም ላይ አቴንድ ታደርጊያለሽ
You know, I'm definitely open to it. It's something that I've talked about. I don't know what kind of events there are. And, you know, I definitely just want to be very selective about what I do. But that's definitely something I'm considering. I think everybody should consider it, you know, and when you go, you can have fun, but also remember, this is a good time to bring things from the diaspora to help people there. There are things that are difficult to get in Ethiopia, especially in this time. So I think people should, you know, we saw how they were celebrating the idea of TPLF storming into Addis and terrorizing everybody. That was just what, 6 weeks ago, right? Yeah. And or even less. It's not like that anymore, and people should not be scared to go back to their country, take the necessary precautions that they feel are important. And yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. It's my country at the end of the day. There's a lot of people there that I've been working with. And you know, it's just a matter of having the time, doing it in the right way so that it's safe, it's secure, but also reaches the people that we want to reach.
በዚህ ዙር ስትሄጂ ጋዜጠኞች የማሰልጠን ሐሳብ አለሽ?
Talking to journalists?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, of course, that sounds like a good idea. That's here. The problem right now is every day I'm doing so much for today that it's hard to plan ahead. But yeah, that would be something that is, I'm talking to some, but that would be something worth getting together with, possibly going to, you know, potentially IDP camps, seeing for myself what it looks like, possibly. It's just a matter of the logistics, but there's a lot I want to do. It's, can I do it in the time that I have? And, you know, does it make sense to do it right now?
ያው እንግዲህ እንደምታውቂው ከፕሮፌሰር አረጋዊና አሰፋ ጋራ በናሁ ቴሌቪዥን ቆይታ አድርገን ነበር አሁንም ካንቺ ጋራ ከሄርሜላ አረጋዊ ጋራ ቃለ መጠይቅ አድርገን ቆይተናል ናሁ ቴሌቪዥን የናንተን እንቅስቃሴ እናንተ የምታደርጉትን ጥረት እናንተ የምታደርጉትን ለኢትዮጵያ የምታደርጉትን አስተዋጽኦ በከፍተኛ ደረጃ አውቀና ይሰጣል ያከብራልም ይሄንንም አስመልክቶ እንግዲህ ናሁ ቴሌቪዥን እንደሞያ አጋር ማለት ነው አንድ የሚዲያ ድርጅት አሁን አንቺንም ኢንቫይት እዚህ ስትደረግና ለቃለ መጠይቅ ሲደረግ እንዲሁ ሶሊዳሪቲም ጭምራለና ምናልባት ወደ ኢትዮጵያ እንደምትመጪ የሚወሩ ሩመሮች አሉ እና እንዴት ነው ወደ ኢትዮጵያ መምጣትሽ እርግጥ ሆነ
You know, I'm thinking about it, but I'm going to make the decisions I think are best for me. You know, it's something that was initially in the plans. We'll see if it goes through. At the end of the day, you know, I've been doing this for, like you said, 4 months. I'm gonna make the best decision for myself. And that requires a little bit of time and seeing what the logistics are. But you know, I appreciate that you guys have extended the invitation. You know, we're talking to other people as well to see what we could do once, you know, if we are there. You know, my mom and I have different maybe agendas to some degree too when it comes to where we would go and what we would see. She's an educator. I'm coming from the journalistic end. So it really, I would like to come. It would be nice to be a part of the great Ethiopian homecoming, but you know, I have a very specific needs in terms of what I need to be there. So I'll make that decision as it gets closer, but it would be a beautiful thing if we could all convene there for the great Ethiopian homecoming.
የጠየኩሽ የናሁ ቴሌቪዥን ባለቤት እና ስራ አስኪያጅ አቶ ቴዎድሮስ ሽፈራው እንደ አንድ ኢትዮጵያዊ አሁን ያጣነው ነገር በኢትዮጵያውያን መካከል የሚደረግ ነው። አሁን ይሄ ህዝብ ለህዝብ ነው። ምክንያቱም እንደ ሚዲያ ባለቤትነታቸው እንደ አንድ ኢትዮጵያዊ ላንቺና ለናትሽ ታላቅ አክብሮት በማድረግ ፍቅራቸውን አክብሮታቸውን ለመግለጽ የሄዱበት ስቴፕ አለ። ይሄ ስቴፕ ደግሞ እንግዲህ እናንተን እንግዳ የማድረግ ነገር ነው። ያ ወደፊት ፎር ዲፈረንት ሪዝን ታነሽዋለሽ፣ ግን ያው ምስጋናውንና እውቅናውን ሰጥተሽ ለማለፍ እድሉን ልስጥሽ ብዬ ነው።
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate, I know, you know, you guys have extended the invitation. It's much appreciated. And I get the spirit in which it's coming from. And it's great that it is from Tedros and the, you know, the company. I appreciate from media company to journalists. I appreciate it coming from there as opposed to anywhere else. You know, like I said, it's December 16th. There's time. I hope to. That's something that we've talked about, and I think we'll get a clear idea of as it gets closer.
ያ አንድ እሱ ነው። ወደ በኋላ ላይ እንግዲህ ጊዜው ሲቀርብ እንነጋገር ይሆናል። አንድ ትልቅ ነገር ኢትዮጵያውያን አሁን አንቺ በሚዲያው አቅጣጫ እየሰራሽ እንዳለው በሚዲያ ደረጃ ላይ አንድ ትልቅ ስራ እየሰሩ ነው አቶ ቴዎድሮስ። አንዱ ካሽ ጎ የሚባል የዚህ የመኒ ትራንስፈር የዚህ የዌስተርን ዶሚናንስ በየአቅጣጫው ፋይት ማድረግ አለብን። ጎጉዞ የሚልም አንድ እንትን አላቸው። የዚህ ትኬት ኦንላይን ነው የምትቆርጭበት። ጎግ ይሄ ካሽ ጎ ገንዘብ ለመላክ ዲያስፖራ ወደ ኢትዮጵያ በዝቅተኛ ኮሚሽን ነው። በተለይ አሁን ለካሚንግ 6 ወር ደግሞ ምንም ኢትዮጵያ ችግር ውስጥ ስላለች ከኮሚሽን ነፃ በሆነ የመኒ ትራንስፈር ነገር ይሰራሉ። ይሄ ዌስተርን ዩኒየን ያው አንድ ሌላ ኢምፓየር ነው። ይሄንን ኢምፓየር ከኛ በኢትዮጵያውያን ማለት በአፍሪካን ዲያስፖራ ገንዘብ አፍሪካ ላይ ወንጀል የሚፈጥሩ አፍሪካ ላይ እንድትበታተን ኢትዮጵያ ላይ ችግር እንዲፈጠር የሚሰሩ ድርጅቶችን ይሄንን ኢኮኖሚክ ዋርፌር ውስጥ ከፍተኛ ደረጃ ባትሉን ስፒርሄድ የሚያደርጉ ናቸው። እንግዲህ እንደናንተም አይነት አሁን አንቺም ወደፊት ሚዲያ እንዲህ አይነት ኢትዮጵያውያን ኦሪጂናል ሐሳቦችን በማበረታታት ወደፊት እርስ በርስ እየተረዳዳን በጋራ ነው ማደግ የሚገባል። we have to feed each other እና አሁን እንደዚህ እንዲህ አይነት ነገሮችን እንዴት ነው የኢትዮጵያውያንን የፈጠራ ለየት ያለ መንገድ ኢንከሬጅ የምታደርጊው አንቺ?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, Guzo, you know, so I know iZone, you know, I don't necessarily endorse any of them, but just coming from a place of what I know and what I don't know, but I do believe in using your economic power to make a statement. So, you know, bringing $1 to Ethiopia, spending your money there, bringing whatever economic benefits that come from being there, from spending your money at restaurants and businesses and doing whatever you can to infuse the economy, because we know it's been hurting so much from the war. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Let your money speak. Is your money going to go towards a war, or is your money going to go to rehabilitation and rebuilding the country? If you're saying something but spending your money in a different place, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, I absolutely encourage people using their money to make statements about what they believe in. I hope that this can help revive the economy in Ethiopia. And I know a lot of people that are excited to go, that have cut their tickets, that are really invested. So I think it's, you know, we could hit that million for sure. And what an amazing, you know, statement that would be to those in the West who just wanted to terrorize the country and wanted to see it, you know, fall to be able to say, you know what, look at all these smart Africans after all. Like, they're investing in their country. We're not so stupid after all. So I think that would be an incredible way to really just, you know, stick it to those who wanted to see Ethiopia crumble.
ያ እንደዚህ ነው መስራት ያለብን ኢትዮጵያን በሁሉ ነገር ከፍ ያለ ቦታ ጋር ለማምጣት ሁሉም ባለው ወርክስ ኦፍ ላይፍ ኢን ኤቭሪ ዲሲፕሊን በመኒ ትራንስፈር ፋይት ማድረግ አለብን የዌስተርን ዩኒየን ዶሚናንስ ምክንያቱም ከኢትዮጵያ በ1 ቢሊዮን ዶላር ገደማ በአመት ኮሚሽን ይወስዳሉ ይሄ ኮሚሽን ኢትስ አ ሎት ኦፍ ማኒ አገር በቀል በሆኑ ድርጅቶች በኢትዮጵያውያን በተሰሩ ሶፍትዌሮች አፕሊኬሽኖች የተሰሩ ነገሮች በተለይ ከኢትዮጵያ ውጭ የምንኖር ሰዎች ይሄንን የማበረታታት የመደገፍ የሞራልም እንደ ብሔራዊም ግዴታ አለን ውይይታችንን ለማጠናቀቅ እስቲ በአማርኛ የመጨረሻ ጉርሻ ቲፕ ኩዌስችን ልስጥሽና ክሎዚንግ ሪማርኩን አንቺ ያርጊው ለኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ ያለሽን መልእክት ብዙዎች ይወዱሻል ብዙዎች ያደንቁሻል ብዙዎች ያከብሩሻልና እስኪ የመጨረሻ መልእክትሽን በአማርኛ አስተላልፊና ውይይታችንን እንጨርስ
እሺ እሞክራለሁ I'll say you know አይዟችሁ ጊዜው ይቀየራል ምንም ነገር forever አይሆንም አሁን ያለው ምን ነው የሚባለው unity ረጅም አንድነት አንድነት የሚሻልበት ቦታ ይወስደናል እሱ ነው የሚያሻግረን out of this ጦርነት so አይዟችሁ እግዚአብሔር አገራችን ሰላም ያርግልን ከዛ በኋላ I think everything will be okay in time. So thank you so much. But አመሰግናለሁ
እኔም እንግዲህ ሄርሜላ አረጋዊ ውድ ጊዜሽን ሰውተሽ ለዚህ የናሁ ቴሌቪዥን የምዕራፍ ፕሮግራም ቃለ መጠይቅ ለማድረግ ስለፈቀድሽና ስለወደድሽ በዝግጅት ክፍሉ በእኔ ባዘጋጅና አቅራቢው ኤልያስ አወቀ ስም በተመልካቾቻችንም ስም ከፍተኛ ምስጋናዬን አቀርባለሁ አመሰግናለሁ